Hi, Matthias. Good morning for me. Good evening to you.
Hi, good morning. Very pleased to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. It's first time to this channel. Your fourth or fifth time, I think, collectively that we've done one of these
Mm.
types of things together. Somewhere in that ballpark.
I'm not counting, but yeah, sounds about right. I
Yeah.
distinctly remember our very first live stream back in 22, I think, when PBI Tools had just seen the light of public release. That was a big deal.
Ki- the name, the person's slipping me. Somebody introduced the two of us. They're like, "Hey, there's this person named Mathias who's built this really cool tool. You should have him on your show." I cannot remember who it was, but somebody referred you essentially. And like, yeah, you should bring them on. And uh, yeah, do you remember who that was, or
Not
so,
sure.
some colleague of yours? I know,
Okay,
but like somebody who's really techy or into tools. It might have been like Mike Carl or somebody like that. But just like, hey,
right.
this thing is going to get big. You should definitely talk to this person.
Hmm.
Yeah, that was one of the
Uh,
first times I think you'd kind of publicly shown the PBI
mhm.
tools back then, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It was end of January. And I think, yeah, the show with you was quite pivotal actually in making more people aware of it. Um,
And now we
so
have
that's
Tyndall.
great. And now we have Tyndall and
Yeah.
PPIP as well. Um,
Yes, it's the whole hardening encouragement and adaptation has been very nice. As well, I'm sure see on this show and the ability to much more easily build programmatic tools that can do changes to the stuff. So
exactly.
I always much appreciated for the nudge to Microsoft to do that sooner than later.
What a good segue, actually, right? Because obviously we're talking AI today and
Uh-huh.
generative AI. These things are particularly powerful when it comes to code and text and anything you can represent in a text file. So having stuff like Tyndall and PPIR for Power BI enables a lot of cool stuff.
I think that's
The I mean,
something
go ahead.
as I was saying, I think that's something as well. Speaking to Rui, who is, for people who don't know, the PM looking after all of this, something he's very aware of is this isn't just for source control, right? It opens up. Everyone thinks PBIP, Tyndall thinks source control, thinks Git. Yes, it does that. It does so much more, which I feel we're going to see a lot of today. So it's very exciting times. I think it's something that
It's
people have
wonderful.
wanted for a while.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's wonderful to see, and we absolutely have to give Rui a lot of credit here. How much enthusiasm he brings into this as a project, but most importantly, also how he's embraced agentic development over the past, I don't know, 6 months or so. Um, Anyone who's been to FabConf in Vienna recently will have seen him filling a massive theater of um, Power BI developers and getting everyone excited around capabilities in terms of using AI for that. So yeah.
I think he's a because he gets so hyped about whatever he's working on. He's a good hype man for that stuff because
Mm,
he I think he exudes the excitement on stage with a lot of this
mm,
because it's I think there are certain people who really enjoy like being able to play in a sandbox and really just get into the creative aspect of coding and other stuff. And he's one of those people I like. He can get very technical, but I think still easily articulate like a lot of this stuff that he's been working on. So, and it's been fun even with him to see him go from, external MVP onto homing a lot of the desktop hardening and Tyndall and everything else with like the pro developer tools within Microsoft now. Excellent. Yeah,
interestingly,
go ahead.
sorry. um, the obviously in our sphere, everyone is sort of familiar with Tyndall as as an acronym, right? But it's always when you look at AI generated transcripts and um, um, speech recognition, it's always quite funny to see what they make of Tyndall. Uh,
Yeah.
which is also something I'm going to bring up later on if we have time for it. I actually have a demo prepared just for that.
Oh, nice. Okay. I think what would be a good starting point as well too is maybe a little elevator pitch and background on you, kind of to set the stage and context, and then from there we can kind of segue into the topic of the day with AI whenever you're ready.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, Matthias Thierbach, if you don't know me, been a data platform MVP for a couple of years now. Been very lucky to have had the opportunity of actually contributing straight into the Power BI product with Tyndall a little while ago. And well, I've also mentioned PBI tools here, which obviously we talked about already. So yeah, I've been in the Power BI / Fabric space for as long as possible, but I'm originally a hardcore software engineer and software architect. So I've always, particularly with respect to custom tooling, I've always tried to bring those two things together. And turns out that what we've got in place now with respect to agentic capabilities is a very nice sweet spot and a place where I feel extremely comfortable. Hope we can talk about that a bit.
Yeah, no, and I think I just mentioned the software engineer and a few others. Your tool, and I'll continue to probably find this true until the end of time, is like all of the best tools that end up as community tools start with a tool that's built like, man, I really hate this part about my job, and I need a tool to help me with that. And then, hey, maybe other people might find this useful, because you're like that you built the PBI tools essentially for you to help within the previous employer that you were with back in 2021, right? Before it became like public. Yeah.
I started working on it in 17, 18 even.
Okay.
And then it took quite a few years before I went ahead and made it public. But as far as I was concerned, it was absolutely necessary to take away the pain of having no source control and no visibility, particularly in an enterprise context where you have a team and you want to collaborate. Working with binary PBX files was a non-starter. I just had to do something about it. And I still remember how, before PBI tools became PBI tools, how it was basically just a collection of scripts that I had hacked together over time, sort of breaking into PBX files and trying to make sense of what's in there and extracting things like M expressions and DAX expressions, etc. It's very, very nice to see that now with PPIP and Tyndall, we said it before, everyone out of the box easily has access to that. It was not like that at all just a few years ago.
Oh yeah, I mean it's like again, like we were talking about before the stream started. Like I've been building like a Swiss Army tool that does a bunch of different things, and like I honestly wouldn't even attempt to build something like that would have to go punch through a zip file, extract, and then the significantly less file structured model and files inside of it. And now it's so easy just to go reach in any of the components because there's such a consistent structure for that. So I do think it is, I think it just speaks to how hard it was back when A, there was no vibe coding when you were doing that, and B, like actually getting into the proper parts of the PBIX in any capacity, either for the model or the report layer, was very difficult and fragile. One little piece of code breaks and just the file won't open. There's no indication of like what's wrong really with that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, just as another segue, what I want to talk about today is quite a similar thing in that it's all sort of driven by curiosity, right? So I've found myself over the past year or so getting deeper and deeper into AI things and exploring agentic development. But what I still vividly remember how difficult it was to begin with, making sense of all sorts of new concepts and effectively having to relearn lots of things as well, particularly coming from a software engineering point of view. So what I wanted to try today, at least a little bit, was, if possible, to help some people out there who still feel as confused and overwhelmed as I have a while ago, and just sort of look into some of the underlying concepts and try to figure out how stuff actually works, sort of internally under the hoods. I can't help myself when I'm sort of getting into a new domain. I really need to understand in and out how stuff works. So I've tried in preparing for this to sort of I've looked into what would it take to rebuild from scratch, in a very, very simple way. Some of the agentic tools that were actually, or that some of us are working with on a daily basis today. And not because I want to compete with Claude Code or so, but because I think truly understanding how they work can also be really useful in terms of figuring out, well, how do I relate to that moving forward from a career point of view, right? Where can I potentially get into now that there seems to be a really good opportunity? And I think we will probably see a lot of demand around building agentic systems moving forward. So,
Absolutely.
Taking away the fear of all of that being strange and difficult is something I'm sort of I want to aim for here. I've definitely I've mentioned it in my LinkedIn post, advertising this session, but I've definitely come around 180 degrees, from complete skepticism to being a complete full-on believer. So didn't expect that
Nice.
at all. But there we go. It happened, and I can't help myself now.
Once you start playing around with it, I think and maybe you had a similar experience. I think until for a lot of people, until you can see the direct application to yourself and you start getting your hands dirty with it a little bit, so to speak, it's a little harder to all right, there's all these videos and articles and everybody's talking about it, the best second coming since Jesus and all this stuff. It's got to be overhyped. But I would similarly, I got on the train a bit when I actually started building my own MCP servers and doing a bunch of other stuff that started to directly impact efficiency at my own job versus just oh, that looks cool in concept, but I'm just reading an article.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah. Do you want me to just jump in?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. So I've I'm sort of trying to do this a little differently. I actually built using AI agents a little app virtually overnight. So that is something I only started yesterday to showcase some very, very simple demos and ultimately to make the point of how the various AI components work together. So if I can start off with my conclusion, I think it's really important for everyone to be aware that there are sort of three major components that ultimately make up an agentic or an AI system. I can see that there's a lot of hype, certainly with respect to MCP servers. The bubble I live in, you sort of get bombarded with everyone coming up and publishing new MCP servers. So it sometimes feels like, this is where everything's happening. But I want to make the point here that this is only 1 out of 3 really important components.
Yep.
People are almost certainly aware of LLMs, large language models, and them being, very foundational here. But the third one I want to add to the mix, and that's maybe not so common, is what I'm calling the runtime here. So basically an orchestrator that actually brings together a large language model, the user, and the various tools, which can be MCP servers, can be other types of tools. And hopefully I can sort of show how they all interact. So let me start off with a little demo in VS Code. Let me go in here. So I've got the VS Code Copilot chat window open here, which hopefully lots of people are familiar with. In here, what's really important to understand is that we've got those 3 different modes. There's actually, I think, ask is the default. It's what you generally end up default to when you start a new chat. Agent is something that was added, I don't know, at some point over the summer. That's sort of where real excitement and real opportunity is nowadays. So let me just explain for beginners in that space what the difference is. When it comes to ask, you basically have an LLM brain there to give you explanations, right? So it's effectively a read-only access to the context you're in. As I said before, I've built a little app as a demo app. I'm just out of convenience, I'm still in that exact same app here, right? And so one thing that let me go in here. One thing that I always find myself not having the greatest time with is understanding CSS, right? So this would be one example where the ask explainer mode can actually be extremely useful, right? This is low entry, but immediately adds massive benefits. So let's say I'm in this particular React file, and I just want to understand what do those class names mean, right? I can go in here and say, please explain, and then I just pop in what I've copied there, and the chat will go away, and as you can tell, it's actually giving me an awesome to the point summary of what I need to know, right? It's well formatted, it's very succinct, and it actually explains what I need to know. In the old days, without that chat window, I would have had to do lots of Stack Overflow or Google searches, or would have had to consult my CSS books, right? And so that's that. It's all read only, and again, if you're using those capabilities just for that, it already adds a lot. The real beauty comes in when you actually switch to agent mode, and that's something I want people to understand in terms of what the difference is here. In agent mode, you're still interacting with a large language model, which you can sort of think of as a brain, right? It has some knowledge, it has some capabilities, it can reason, it understands questions, and it can sort of come up with responses. In agent mode, you effectively go into read-write mode, where you can give it tasks rather than just ask questions. And then the idea is that the agent, which is basically an orchestrated LLM, is able to use so-called tools to perform tasks. And tools can be things like read the various files I've got in my project, or make edits to those files, or run a script that tries something out, right? So let me, if we go back here, so again, this is the app that's actually being built in that project. Let's say I don't want to see this reference item anymore, right? I can ask it and say, please hide or remove the references item in the app sidebar. And then all sorts of things can happen, right? It can either do exactly what you want, because it's smart enough and the project is not complex enough, or it can do something completely strange. You just don't know. But the most important thing is, first of all, it takes longer. Secondly, you can see that it's actually going through a series of steps, like for instance here, I created 4 to-dos, search text for blah, 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 considered sidebar. So this is not me asking a question and getting a response back. This is something going off and being able to perform things like searching and editing and reading to make changes. So there we go. The nice thing with the VS Code integration is that it gives you, well, first of all, a good degree of control with respect to what's changed, in the sense that you can see where changes have been made, and you can explicitly confirm or reject them by pressing keep or undo. You can you also get a very nice summary. So this is there's a lot more intelligence happening here, and given that this is an app which actually has hot reloading, the very immediate test I can do to see whether the agent has done the right thing is I can just go back here, and there we go. Right, so this leak is no longer here. So so we're happy or we're lucky in a sense that it works straight away, and at least from the outside, it did the right thing, right? So let's go back here. Let's just have a quick look. So only one file was changed, so that's pretty straightforward. Which means we only have one place to check. And then this particular file, we can see that this reference is gone. So actually, it's done the right thing. And if I confirm now, the whole thing is obviously under source control as well. I still have full control with respect to what I'm actually making with those changes. So what I wanted to show is how this interaction that we've just gone through, how that actually breaks down sort of to more fundamental conversations between me as a user and the large language model, right? And so the point I've made previously is this one, right? When we go into agent mode, we actually have a number of particular tools that the agent has access to, and that we can rely on in actually getting some more high-level tasks done. So that's one of the main differentiators. If we go into the app here, I have this particular demo. Sorry, let's start with that one. I've got this particular demo. So here, I'm showing sort of in a very, very basic way how we can connect to a cloud-hosted large language model, whilst also providing a local tool. In this particular case, it's a local MCP server. And we mentioned Tyndall previously, right? I noticed that the guy in the Cube guys recently had some very cool stuff around Tyndall on their channel. So here we go. If you haven't seen that yet, there we go. So that was published, can I see the date here? 8 days ago, there we go. It's already had 34,000 views.
Nice.
So just to give one example of what making tools available to LLM can do, if I take this particular link and if I go into my demo here, I've got a tool made available to it that is actually able to fetch transcripts from a YouTube video and summarize them. Here we go. So let's run this. And hopefully that works. There we go. So now I don't have to spend 6 minutes listening to the video. I've actually had this. I don't know. I didn't look on my clock here, but I had this within 10 minutes or so.
That's cool.
I've got quite a bit to read here. So don't really like that. I'm going to ask it, can you please give me a more concise summary, only using bullet points. Here we go. Let's do that. And that's actually better. That's how I like it. That is one example of how you sort of bring additional capabilities into this brain, right? But it's quite interesting to understand how that actually works. So first of all, as I said before, this tool is something which I've got running in Docker. Docker, by the way, has this really cool MCP toolkit. It allows you to fetch publicly available MCP servers. There are 266 right now. And you can basically combine them just by selecting them from the server. You can combine them here, and then you only make one single connection into your AI client, which will be your Docker desktop instance, which then effectively acts as a proxy. Plus the other thing, it actually runs that as a Docker container, right? So this particular one right now is running down here, which means I can fully inspect what's going on in there. This one actually happens to give me all the outputs of how it's being used. Let's make sense of this because I said this is running. Clearly, this is running on my machine, right? But I also said that we're actually talking to a cloud-hosted model. So how does that work? And that's really important to understand. When you make available tools to your agents, the model you're working with is not able to execute those tools at all. The model only receives metadata about what the tools can do. If the model thinks it wants to or needs to, it actually sends a request back to you, as in back to your application, to say, please run that tool for me and send back the results. And that's precisely what's happening here, right? So if we go back to this interaction, I can also ask the model, hello, who are you, and which tools do you have access to? And then it will tell me that it has access to a tool that can get information about YouTube videos and transcripts, even though this thing that's hosted somewhere in the cloud can't do that stuff, right? So
that's cool.
There's a flow here. I've tried to put that into a little diagram here, where we're basically saying, me as the user, I'm interacting with what I call the runtime. So basically, whatever thing I've got on my machine that's an application, hosting a chat, etc. That one talks to a remote LLM agent, makes it aware that it has certain tools it can access, right? So it basically publishes tool schemas. The agent then decides that actually, given one of the questions it's had, they can be answered by invoking some of those tools. So it feeds back not with a response, but it feeds back with a request to call that tool. And then this is something which has to happen in this case, on your machine. So in this case, the request goes into the Docker container. That one then effectively gets the link to that YouTube video. It fetches the transcript, and it sends the raw transcript back for my local agent to then send back as the tool result to the LLM agent. Which then ends up doing the summarization, right? So there's a lot of stuff being sent back and forth here, particular since that transcript obviously is quite would contain quite a lot of data, but it's really important to actually understand that difference. And so if we have a look here, so if I go back here, the other thing, we can see in here as well. So this is the app that's currently hosting this particular YouTube transcript MCP, and you can actually see, how it's requested. First of all, list the tools, and then call the tool, and so on and so forth. All right, so now that same stuff I can actually do without talking to. So as you've just seen, right? There's a degree of indirection happening here. And most importantly, there's a lot of information that's being shared with some cloud-hosted model, right? So we can also run local models. In fact, there are quite a few open source models available. And I happen to have a software here called LM Studio. Which
okay, interesting. I've not seen this before. Go ahead.
So there are basically there are two softwares, LM Studio and Olama. LM Studio arguably has a substantially nicer UI. Olama is a bit more sort of the command line, text interface. So this one is actually really cool. It also has a chat interface, but most importantly, you can load any freely available open source models. I've got this one loaded right now, and I've got a local server exposed on this port in this URL, which effectively speaks the exact same protocol like all cloud-hosted models, right? So it's ultimately just sort of changing the IP or the URL you're talking to. But other than that, it's got the exact same capabilities. So the model I've loaded here, as you can tell, has specifically been trained for tool use. So, which means I can actually show something running completely local that does quite similar stuff. So if I go back here, right, so there we go. That's that one.
Nice.
It's connected to my LM Studio instance. And if I ask it, what tools do you have access to? Whenever I'm working with a new model, I sort of like asking those meta questions because it's usually quite cool how they've been trained in terms of explaining their capabilities. So this is a QN, and specifically it says it has access to a weather tool. Basically, it's running locally. It has some knowledge that's restricted to whenever that model was trained, and it has this additional capability of being able to tell the weather. So if I now say I'm currently in London, how should I dress when I go outside? So let's not ask explicitly about the weather. Let's figure out. Let's see whether it can figure out that that's actually what I want, right? And there we go. Look at that. It's not actually 25 degrees here, but I'll show you why it thinks that. But
Okay.
it's been this is actually where a degree of intelligence is coming in, right? So this thing knows, first of all, that London is a place. It knows that I've made available to it a tool that can give it the weather for a given city, and it has inferred that my question around how to dress really needs some information about the weather, right? So there we go. So how did I do that? It's actually much easier than you think. So first of all, we can see in here. That's another reason why I like LM Studio. I'm in debug log mode here, so I can actually see that it's just received a request from my application, and we can see the entire conversation history in there, right? So when it comes to LLMs, we distinguish 4 different types of roles. The user role, that's me. The assistant role, that's the AI, that's the large language model. Then we have the tool, which in this case is the weather tool, could also be an MCP server. And then we also have a system role, which we don't have an example for right now. So we can basically see not only the entire conversation history, but we can see that every time you pass a new question or you make a new you send a new message, the model receives everything that's been going on so far, right? So models are actually stateless. They don't remember that they're currently in a conversation with you. The only reason why you get the impression that you're having a conversation is because you're orchestrating AI client keeps a history of all the messages that have been going back and forth, and every time it actually sends them, right? I know offline we had a discussion around context window before. This is precisely why the size of a model's context window is so important, because as you accrue iterations in your conversation, and as you are adding more and more questions and responses, this payload that has to be sent back and forth is actually increasing massively, right? But what I wanted to show here in particular is this is my question around London and how to dress. And then assistant, again, assistant is the large language model. That one comes back not with a text content, it comes back with a tool call request. And it basically says, before I can reply to the user, please invoke the get weather tool with the argument of city equals London. And this is where my local orchestrator needs to then do the right thing. It basically needs to read that, and it then needs to execute the tool, which in this case is the YouTube MCP server, and it then sends another round trip to the LLM where this time the role is tool rather than user, and where it says for this particular ID, so this is how they get correlated. The answer from the tool is the weather in London is 25 degrees and sunny. And then after that, the LLM finally creates this, right? So this is then the final message. In this case, that's an assisted message that contains content directed back at the user. Yeah, that's ultimately how all those agent systems out there work, right? Those are the primitives, the conversation history, the ability to define locally available tools using metadata, the ability for models to make a request that certain tool functions are invoked, and then the model being able to respond back to the user, but feeding in what they've learned from the tool. So there we go. So that's one example. What's happening here? Very cool. Right. So let me show you what that look. Again, right? I talked about career earlier. I think moving forward, this is a space where there's a lot of potential for people who traditionally build custom software to actually build agentic system instead. So let me just show you what it takes to make something like this. Here we go. This actually is everything we needed to make this particular interaction work. So I've got a model connection, which in this case goes to the default model in my local LM Studio instance. I've received a bunch of messages which came from the UI, so basically the chat interface. And I'm making available as metadata the fact that I've got this get weather tool. This SDK I'm using here is then pretty much doing everything else. It's coordinating, the back and forth of messages. But most importantly, this particular tool is not an MCP server. It is simply a TypeScript function. You don't have to build your own MCP servers. You don't have to host MCP servers in Docker. You can just make very, very small granular tools available. In this particular case, the get weather tool, it defines with a schema, first of all, what the tool does, and then secondly, which inputs it requires. And then ultimately, it executes something. As you can see, the response is hard-coded here, which is why we were foolishly led to believe earlier that it's actually quite nice and sunny out there. It's not. But there we go. So ultimately, this is an alternative way to make tools available. Anyone who's worked with more high-level tools, like in this case, Copilot Chat or Claude Code, any of those abilities here, being able to create to-dos, being able to search for text, being able to read files, this is all, those are all tools available. Those are all tools made available by this particular application, right? So basically, that's the third thing I wanted to point out. We basically have the brain, the large language model. We've got a bunch of MCP servers that you can bring in sort of in a Lego kind of way. But the most important thing from my point of view is actually the orchestrating application that coordinates that message flow between you, your tools, and the LLM, right? And those applications generally, the more capable they are, generally bring their own built-in tools, right? If you've used Claude Code, which I'm sure many people here have, you're familiar with permissions, and then you've got things like file edit and web fetch and web search, right? Those are all built-in tools that, in this case, Claude Code as the hosting application has defined, and ultimately that makes for a much richer experience because the LLM you're working with, can then pretty much do things like file edits and web fetch, etc., etc.
Well, it sounds like a big thing, as you're saying, is to your point, the orchestrator, the agent mode, for it to be able to actually like go and delegate subtasks out for you to do larger application tasks rather than like single task design.
And I think where there's also a real great potential, for engineers and AI builders moving forward is, in orchestration. So there was another example I wanted to show, which is here. Right. So if we go back to that one, this is just a bog standard example of a chat interface talking to a remote model, and I prepared a question earlier, which I've lost now. Okay, right. I'll just replicate it. So please let me know. What did I say earlier? What major events are happening in London this week? Okay. Do you want to make a bet what the reply is for that one?
I'm going to assume it's something that's been pre-programmed, yeah?
Let's see what we're getting. Right, there we go. It says, I can't do it.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Which makes sense, right? I mean, all these models, they've been trained at some point in time. They may
True.
have some historic knowledge, but they definitely, as we've just seen, a large language model by itself has no ability to, go out and perform a web search or something like that. That's what's called a tool. That's something you need to give it, right? But I've built in this extra toggle here, which when you select it, will actually perform a web search when you ask a question. And if we combine that with what we've seen before, where basically every interaction between you and the model is always based on the complete conversation history, you can then see how you can combine capabilities from different models in such a way that I'm now asking this question. Here we go. I'm hopefully getting something real back. Here, there we go. Look at that. Major festivals,
nice.
cultural events. So this is now coming from a tool that's able to look online in real time, But the point I'm trying to make is I can now go back to my LLM because this information is in my conversation history now, right? I can ask my LLM now to say, this is a lot of information. Please pick the top 3 for me and provide a succinct summary. And now my GPT-4o actually has some information it can work with, and it has picked London Literature Festival, Devil Wears Prada musical, and for the Culture Festival in Hammersmith Theatre. There we go.
Nice.
So I'm showing that to give people some ideas in terms of how you can smartly orchestrate capabilities, from different tools and models, and still sort of feed that into a coherent experience. And again, that's definitely where I'm expecting a lot of innovation and a lot of sort of development moving forward. Not relying on just one particular model for a given task, but being able to sort of combine them in a way where you take advantage of only the best things of each model.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah, I would
there we
agree.
go. I think this particular one also, that's the other thing I wanted to show here. So because I'm hosting this myself, I have complete visibility of all the stuff that's going on in the background, right? And in particular, I actually get very rich metadata here in terms of, this just cost me 0.415 US cents, right? It also used a total of 1,000 tokens, 788 input and 218 output tokens. In this particular, normally you have that kind of balance between input and output. Normally you feed in a lot and then you get back something that's substantially smaller, so that's expected. That's also what's reflected in pricing, right? So if I
True.
just one other thing I wanted to show, I might as well do that now. If you want to have a good overview of which models are out there and available, I personally like Vercel AI Gateway very much. In fact, that's what I'm using here. It's got the huge advantage that you can pay one bill to Vercel and you can access pretty much any commercial model that's out there, because Vercel then effectively proxies your requests to the respective providers, which means you don't have to have a bidding relationship with Anthropic and with Google and with Azure.
That's nice.
It's all just one, right? It also means if you just want to try a particular provider, as an experiment, you don't have to figure out how to set up billing with them. You've got all of those available here. So if we're looking at this particular model as an example, here we go. So that's what I was trying to say earlier. You can generally see in terms of pricing, output tokens are generally a multiple of input tokens to basically, reflect the fact that you generally feed in substantially more in terms of volume than what you get back. So the pricing reflects that very nicely. All right. That is that. And happy to take a break here or take any break questions.
I didn't realize that there were orchestrators for like one platform to essentially pay for tokens where you could just you kind of universally use that. I'm assuming though with some of the agents as well too, you could probably pair those together where the agent could even just essentially like you can use one model to run the orchestrator agent, but then that can then determine best model to send requests to for the agents between any of those other any of the platforms in theory, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing which is something really worth thinking about, and I see a lot of people, particularly in dev circles, who are quite advanced. They use different types of models to validate each other's work, right? So that's a very nice pattern as well. In fact, there is a MCP server. I've forgotten the name now. There's a very cool MCP server that allows you to actually set up I'm probably going to have to provide that offline, but it allows you to set up other models, and it allows you to basically run a simple query against that model as an MVP server tool, right? So that's something where you could, for instance, have a Claude Code workflow where you plug in that MCP server to use, I don't know, GPT-5 codecs to verify what Claude Code has produced in terms of a plan, right? Okay, so here this is just as an FYI, this is me using the AI gateway. You actually get very granular and very neat logging of all your requests, how much you've been charged, how many tokens you've used, how long the request took, and which model you've used. So as you can see, this is, looking at those timings here, this is exactly what we've just done in the demo previously.
That's really cool.
And this 0.415 we saw earlier is actually reflected right here as well. Okay, so that's pretty much the main thing I wanted to share in terms of, just how do these things really work together? What does it mean for you making an MCP server available? What actually is sent across the wire? What isn't? But also how can you then orchestrate different capabilities in terms of different tools, local tools, MCP servers, and different types of models to create either a more capable flow or a more cost-efficient flow, right? Could be the other thing.
And there's one question that I actually had to you, because it was a good conversation that I had with Kurt. Because we had a similar but separate kind of like just chat on. Everybody's chatting about AI these days. But one thing that I think that came up that was a good takeaway from the other stream that I did to this one is the idea of MCPs versus some of the CLI command line interface functions and other stuff there that are becoming available. And like to our whole thing of running out of tokens, the thing that can benefit from as these libraries continue to grow, is leveraging those because maybe you've experienced this, like MCP servers can end up eating a lot of the tokens just to have to load those in place.
Yes.
So they're like I don't think it's talked about as much, but it's a good practice in general is like, it's very easy to end up with 30 MCP servers installed on your computer. And if you're not using them at the moment, turn them off, because otherwise you might end up using 30 to 50% of your tokens in a conversation thread. Potentially like just, having and needing to store that information. So turn them on and off as needed, I think is a good advice. If you want to build them, because they're amazing, but they're not a zero cost. It's but when it comes to that stuff.
Yes, absolutely. It's a really good point. So I've just gone into the tool config setting for my VS Code chat. And you can see that, again, as I said earlier, it has a number of built-in tools, right? So this is really what differentiates those user-facing chat applications. What they ship in terms of built-in capabilities makes a big difference for your particular use case. So you can see there are a bunch of those, but then also there's a dedicated MCP server connected here, as well as one of my extensions, one of my VS Code extensions happens to ship tools as part of the extension, right? So I'm in a sandbox environment here, but on a different machine, I've definitely seen, because of the number of extensions I've had enabled, coming into this interface and actually being presented with a warning, because I already had 170 plus tools enabled just because of all my VS Code extensions. And as you rightly say, that can be a huge problem in terms of clogging your context window. As we've seen before, right? Not only, so every time, this is a point which is really, really important to take home, right? LLMs are stateless, You've got the illusion of a conversation, and that's only created because every time you ask a new question, the entire history of what you've done so far is being sent again, right? And that includes all the metadata about the tools available, which also, by the way, is an important call out for using the new chat button very frequently. When you are done with one particular work item and you want to move to a different thing, don't just continue in the same chat because it's convenient. Create a new chat, which means you actually have a new fresh context window. It's not being clogged with any history.
And something on that note too, that I just saw this morning before the stream, that I've been waiting for Claude to have, because memory is available in GPT. So like if you ask it like, hey, go scan across previous conversations, whatever it is, and like it has that. They just added that to Claude, at least publicly. I saw the pop-up, would you like to turn on memory? And I will say, like, it is very annoying to have to like copy paste or give like, all right, I was previously doing this, you ran out of tokens, can you please continue this? So but yeah, like as you said, it's all of that is loaded. It feels like it remembers, but no, it's a goldfish with a resetting memory, and each time it is very quickly thinking about it. But that's also expensive to have to, which is why, to your, I think, point, the further down you get, the more context is being loaded, and the more easily it can start going off the rails a little bit, just because it can get lost through sorting through all the stuff that's in there. Yeah. So yes, new threads. If you're not just talking, but you're needing it to actually do with a lot of stuff, it I'm sure is very helpful on making sure the wheels don't start falling off.
So one final point I wanted to make, if I may, is the notion of system prompt. That's the one thing I haven't mentioned yet. It's extremely important to know about and to be aware of, but it's also something which is generally abstracted away from you. So again, think of an LLM as a generic brain, right? In and of itself, LLMs, they have no preferences, they have no styles, they have no personality. However, when you're in a chat, you oftentimes have the impression that you're talking to something that's like a person on the other hand, right? So this is precisely what is achieved by a so-called system prompt. So a system prompt is basically one that generally is sent to the LLM in a hidden way by whichever tool you're using.
Yep.
And it gives it very foundational instructions with respect to how to behave and what to do when certain questions are asked, and how to format responses, and which things not to do, etc., etc. So it's very, very important. Real world system prompts tend to be thousands of lines of descriptions, right? In fact, there are even some GitHub projects where they claim to have provided some leaked system prompts from commercial models like Anthropic's models, etc., etc. Also, whenever you use GitHub Copilot or Cloud Code, where you've got the ability to provide things like Claude.md or GitHub instructions.md, those kinds of general instruction files, that is effectively a system prompt. So I just wanted to demonstrate that. As we've seen before, all examples generally give us pretty verbose output, right? So if I put a system prompt in here as part of my conversation to say, always respond in a very succinct way and with no more than one sentence, right? This sort of sets the scene, and it is then something which is applied to whichever question or other instruction I'm sending here. So what could we ask? Let's say, what are the benefits of agentic systems? Why not? Let's just. So here we go. Look at that, right? Normally,
Nice.
I would have received, at least several paragraphs and a number of bullet points. But because I've put that system prompt here, it's actually followed it. So this is very important, particularly if you think about creating your own agentic systems. What system prompt you put into your model is very important, particularly since that is something which is generally not exposed to the user as well, right? So if I take the same question and feed it to the exact same model but without my system prompt, I'm pretty sure we're going to get a very, there we go, look at that. We're going to get a very different response now. So yeah, that was just another concept I wanted to mention here. And again, if you ever wonder about why you should maintain Claude.md or Agent.md or Copilot instructions.md, that's precisely it. That's what's setting the context. That's what's defining, for your particular use case, for your particular project, what you're looking for, what to prioritize, what to pay attention to.
And for people wanting to get started, I'll pop here while I ask some of the questions. For people wanting to get started, I think with a few of these things, either, I think a big one, honestly, would be to maybe build their own local ones or kind of have a bit of a sandbox. Where would you recommend to get started on either installing or making their own MCP or doing any kind of local LLM playgrounds? What would your recommendations be?
Okay, there are three different things you can do, right? So you can train your own LLMs, which it generally means you take a base LLM and then you feed it with a lot of training data, which is basically pre-recorded questions and answers, right? So that's fine-tuning or training, and that is happening a lot out there. But it's also, I mean, you generally need to be a data scientist to be doing that kind of stuff. You wouldn't,
True.
it's very involved. It only really works if you have plenty of data to throw against it, right? So it's not a hobby project. So next thing is building your own MCP server. Go to modelcontextprotocol.org, I think, right? That has, I hope it's the right.
Maybe I can drop the link.
Let me model. Oh, it's .io. There we go. Model.
Okay, I got it.
That's the one. So that's the official specification, and it has references to various SDKs for TypeScript and Python and .NET and whatnot. As I said before, there's definitely a massive hype around that, and there's a lot happening in that space. If you're serious about building MCP servers, I would absolutely look into the MCP toolkit in Docker Desktop. Docker basically has certain instructions with respect to how you can contribute to that catalog. They perform some very strict processes around security. So the stuff you get from the Docker catalog is well maintained from a quality and security point of view. And then the third thing, and this is actually what I'm mostly interested in, what I'm doing a lot of, and where I'm expecting sort of most of the engineering work is going to be happening in years to come, is creating your own agentic systems.
Okay.
Which is basically what I've shown earlier, picking an SDK and then basically connecting to a large language model, making tools available to that model, drafting system prompts, and providing an interface to your users who then end up interacting with your agentic system, right? So I think this is particularly in enterprise contexts where there is loads of scope to basically automate stuff that is currently entirely done by humans, where moving forward agentic systems will assist them and basically do all the boring stuff for them, right?
I agree.
A SDK I'm very fond of is the Vercel AI SDK. That's also the one I've used here. It's TypeScript. Microsoft has recently released it's the MAF. I only have the acronym in my head. I think it's the Microsoft Agent Framework. There we go. The Microsoft Agent Framework. That is available both for Python and .NET, brand new, and is sort of bringing together different separate approaches Microsoft had recently. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, those are the main thing I'm monitoring, but I'm sure there are many more as well. If you're looking at this from a career potential point of view, that third aspect is definitely the one I would strongly hint at.
I think, as you mentioned, like the applicability, especially for enterprise, is for hopefully alleviating some of the painful tasks that the engineers have to do just to make their jobs a little bit easier. I was a boss you had years ago who had the term like death by 1,000 cuts, which is like there are certain tasks that you hate to do, but you have to do. They're not fun. They don't require like high level thinking or anything else, but they are necessary for your job. And hopefully agents and other stuff like that will, or building your own will be able to continue to help with those things. I think I saw the screen moving. Was there something else you wanted to show on the screen?
No.
Web page? Okay.
Well, I mean, I've got those two systems on my screen here. If you, Yeah, there we go.
Ah,
So
yes.
that's the Vercel AI SDK. It's already in the 5th generation right now, so very mature, and I absolutely love it. It's just so good. As you can tell, they've already gone through 4 major versions. It also happens to ship with the AI elements, which is a whole suite of UI components that you can use to actually build modern-looking agentic applications. And then we've got Microsoft's agent framework, which is a bit more sort of enterprisey in terms of a bit more engineering focus, less
Yeah.
less visually appealing, more sort of really good behind the scenes, if that makes sense.
And okay, cool. You already posted those, Steve. Just the links. Excellent. Back here. Perfect. No, I think it's being able to explore the art of possible, so to speak, with a lot of this stuff. I think is continuously helpful for people who want to poke around in it a little bit, or just see how and where this might be applicable to their job and using it. But I think you and a lot of other people are continuing to show like these are aids, these are great assistants. They will help your job, but at least I'll still say for most of the stuff that I've been seeing, anything related to analytics and engineering, these are not job replacers. These are job assisters by far. It's just it will allow us to do our jobs more efficiently, or even explore stuff that we haven't been able to do before. And it's, especially with MCPs, it's a great way to put your ideas to paper, because it's so easy now. I'm doing it myself with just vibe coding. I'm like, I've had this idea, but I hate this task, and I've wanted to automate it for years, and now I can do it without spending 500 hours learning how to code Python. So it's really been nice to have the bar of skill lower a little bit, as long as you can provide the correct context and articulate in a way that allows it to do the job efficiently.
Yeah, I would personally also really stress that point. This is about enabling people to do things they weren't able to do before. This is not about taking anything away from anyone, right? I mean,
Exactly.
This whole app we've just looked at, I virtually started coding that yesterday morning, right? This is a day's work.
That thing,
with the UI connecting to local and remote LLMs, bringing tools in, this would have been completely impossible without any AI help, right? Hopefully people appreciate that and get to experience the beauty of it.
Yeah, I mean, it allows people to become app developers who have never built an app or ever wanted to before. It's it really has, again, I think, just unlocked the gate for like if you have a collection of ideas that like you've always wanted, you wished your computer could do X, you can talk your way through it. Like, okay, I want to build this. How should I do this? Oh, you should use this language. Okay, how would you write this language? Here's a proposal of how I would execute this for you. Would you like me to execute this? And you can just go through that. But it's a great thing for putting thought to paper. And it's definitely been the first time, with the link to the tool that for people watching the chat later, like it's the first time since Power BI first came out where I got really excited to play with a new tool, and like have had more than a few late nights where I could go to bed, but like I'm almost there. Like there's a couple more little tweaks that I want to do on this thing. So it's nice when you can have a bit of fun with something, and there's an aspect of like imaginative like wonder that you can do with this stuff while still having to mitigate practicality of like its limitations.
Yeah. One new habit I've got, and which I've developed out of that, is well, I mean, we haven't really talked about, using agentic systems for development in anger and all of that. But one thing I'm a big fan of is using asynchronous agents, where you basically delegate a task to an agentic system, and then it goes off and works on it in the background. So I've got a bit of a habit now where at the end of each day, I think of a couple of tasks, pop it into GitHub Copilot, which I really like for that purpose, and then just let it work on that overnight, and then pick up what came out of it in the morning, right? Almost extending the working hours you've got available. I mean, it still means obviously you need to think about, first of all, what is the task. Secondly, you need to pick it up and review it and figure out, does it integrate with sort of the bigger picture of what you're working on. But that's something you can fine tune quite nicely over time, and it's just unbelievable.
That's cool
to do that.
I'm always still a little cautious of letting something run like fully autonomously, like just constantly in the background, but as long as the proper guardrails are up, because it can be a bull in the china shop sometimes with some of this stuff.
Yes,
Yeah.
don't give it permissions and rely on source control, right? I mean, I mostly use GitHub coding agents. Whenever they do something, they do it in a new branch. If I don't like it, I just throw the branch away, and it looks like it's never happened, right?
It reminds me of a scene from Silicon Valley from like 10 years ago where it's I think it was Son of Aton was the name of the AI that he built. And at one point, it's all of a sudden like, all of our code's gone. What happened? It's like, well,
Yeah.
I think I asked Son of Aton to remove the bugs. And like, it may have concluded that just deleting the code deletes the bugs, which is technically
Yes,
correct.
I
It did
know.
get rid of the bugs.
I
But
remember
it,
that
like,
scene very
yeah.
well, and it's incredible to realize now how far ahead of their time those writers were back then when they wrote that, right?
They were all
Because-
Silicon Valley nerds. Like their
Yes,
writing
exactly.
staff was like programmers and other people who, yeah.
Yes.
But it was very good at predicting the future. with
Absolutely.
that
This
stuff.
is reality now. And you've
Yeah.
heard stories of people, giving an AI access to some production systems without the guardrails. But at the same time, it's not too difficult being cautious.
Foundations
I
still
wouldn't
apply.
overestimate the risk here.
Yeah, definitely.
Excellent. And any final comments, I think, before we officially put the bow on the stream today? Any takeaways left that you'd want to share with the audience?
For me,
Yes.
so I've got a bit of a lag now. But nothing I haven't said already. Embrace new capabilities, and again, if you're in engineering, and you haven't, and you've had some skepticism around AI capabilities, overcome that. It's you don't want to fall.
Do a quick thing too. Toggle your camera because the screen.
behind too much.
Toggle the camera just briefly because you're for some. Oh, there you go. You're back. Okay. It just took a minute. Cool. Excellent. But what I think just to mirror both probably what Steve and I are feeling like, thank you for so much for coming on for this. As always, it's a big pleasure to be able to get you back on and just kind of nerd out and then do some deep dive on this stuff. I'll continue to iterate the times that we bring you on. We'll looking forward to bringing you back on for the 6th and 7th time as well as stuff comes out. And I'll keep a close eye too, just to see what you're doing with some of the tooling you're building, because I know you've definitely been scaling up for like enterprise stuff, and I think trying to make an even broader adoption for the type of stuff that you've been building. So I'm excited to see what will be coming of that too.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Excellent. All right, I think with perfect, yeah. With that, Art, and just to quickly pop that on, some thanks for the insights as well from Artur. Excellent. With that being said, then I will. Perfect. I think one will. Where is it? This guy. Yeah, we can change the subject now. But I do want to thank you, and have a great rest of your evening, and everyone for tuning in or watching later. Thank you a lot, and we'll see you all on the next stream.
Bye, everyone.